Hey everyone, we're going to do a quick tutorial on how to sew the deaconess style face mask with the add-on of a nose bar and a filter pocket. So this is an example of how the mask turns out. It's a surgical style mask. I've added a pocket, left a pocket open in the bottom for adding filter material, and two options. One is to leave a gap in this top seam, but then we have the top stitching, which creates a space for a nose bar. The other option is to sew the nose bar in, which is what I'm going to show you on this version. So I start off with cotton flannel, and I want to make sure the fuzzy side, the comfortable side, is the correct side. And I'm basically coming in to about 3 inches, just rolling that. If you don't have your iron handy, generally a finger press works pretty well for this. And I'm going on the 3-inch mark from the center and a little bit wider to about a 1/2 inch on either side. So that's just tucking that bottom edge on the flannel fabric, and then I'm going to do the same for the front fabric. Just because this is overall a much darker material, I'm going to change out the bobbin so that I can have this facing the darker material. Just bringing my thread up. Okay, so once I have those two small hems, just the centerpiece hemmed, I'm next putting my elastics on. And for this purpose, I had some rather soft 1/8 inch elastic. You can use many different types of elastic. This was rather soft, and since the request now has been to not do the ear loops like this, since the request now has not been for the ear loops but for ties, and this elastic is really pretty stretchy, I've just been doing them this way so that it becomes elastic ties, and that way somebody could put it on, tie it to where they need it, and then use the stretch of the elastic to remove it. So I'm just pinning my 4 corners to pin that elastic into place and hold it in place. And this is with the 2 right sides together, and the elastic is facing into the center. Now if I wanted to create that gap for a nose piece here, what I was doing before was just putting a pin here to remind me to stop and leave about a 1/4 inch gap in this initial seam. So since I don't want to sew close the pocket opening, I'm actually going to start my stitching just by rolling this down and catching it really close to that edge. And again, I'm putting the burgundy side down Actually, that won't matter as much till we get to the finishing part. So I'm sewing right up to where the elastic is. You want to pull your pin as you get there so that you're not breaking needles on pins. And I'm actually going to take a couple back stitches to lock that elastic in. If you put your needle down, that's a trick you might not be aware of, but put your needle down, lift your presser foot, and you can actually rotate in order to turn a corner quickly. And I'm usually keeping my fingers down on here just so that I can feel and make sure my elastic is not getting in the way. I always like to trim the threads as I go. When we trim our corners, which you normally need to do because we're folding this to the inside and you don't want to have more fabric than you have space, I'm actually trimming just the fabric bits because I want that extra bit of elastic because it will get caught in my top stitching and that will help strengthen and reinforce that. So once I've trimmed, I'm just going to flip this right side out. And actually when making any garment, I love the flip because the flip is always when you get to see kind of the reveal, something starts looking like what it should be. It is handy that our elastics are right in the corners because that gives us a nice way to pull those corners out taut. And I'm just going to roll this edge close and finger press. And now I'm going to go ahead and put my nose bar in. So what I have here is actually a copper wire that's encased in a rigid material that's fabric coated. This came from Swatchon, the supplier from Korea. And so I'm just going to check that that is centered. And then just put a pin to hold it up in place. I'm not pinning actually into it, but just below. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and create my pleats. So what I've been doing is coming down about to the 2-inch mark, folding that up. Again, kind of finger press it in place. And then I'm tucking that in just a hair when I do the pinning. Just so that we don't get wonky pleat edges sticking out. And then I'm coming down to about 1 inch from the bottom and pleating that up. So even though this looks like it's getting really small because we've now reduced it to 3 inches in overall height, this was from the deaconess pattern originally, so I've been using 6-inch by 9-inch rectangles. Also these tie pieces I've been cutting to 10 inches. That seemed to be plenty to wrap around the top and bottom of the head and tie in place. So even though this looks quite small, when it opens with plenty to go over a nose and actually tuck under the chin a little bit. So some people have expressed the concern that if the hole was at the bottom edge, that this would let the filter material fall out, but the filter material is actually a little bit grabby. So once you put your rectangle of it up in there and spread it out, it's not going to have any problem with falling out. Okay, so I'm still going to leave this pocket space open, but now I'm basically coming in about a 1/4 inch and top stitching all the way around. And I'm starting a little bit closer to where that previous seam line was, at least for the bottom. I'm pulling the pin just before I get there, and that way I can use the pin to tuck my pleat nicely. When I come across the top, I can feel where that nose wire is. So a lot of people have mentioned breaking needles on nose wires. I haven't had that problem, but I'm basically using my nail to hold that just outside of where my needle is hitting. And there we go. We have a finished mask with a nose wire that can be bent into shape to stay put, and we can also add some filter inserts. So what I've been doing is cutting rectangles of the filter material and providing those along with the masks, so that these are going to hospitals or facilities that have requested them. All right, thank you very much for joining me today.